Hi guys, how are you today? Excited to see you. Going live with Daisy Kendrick, who's just joining. Where are you all in the world today? Hi Daisy.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
good, thank you. And you?
I'm good. Very excited for today.
Me too.
So
Thank you
much to
so much
talk
for
about.
having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So we'll wait a couple of moments for people to come in and join us. Guys, say where you are in the world. We're a global community and a global power network, so it's fantastic to see you all from around the world. Today, discussing with Daisy Kendrick how to live consciously and you don't need to be perfect. Do you, Daisy?
No, not at all.
No, exactly. So, shall we get started?
Yeah.
Amazing. So, Daisy, congratulations, first of all, on the launch of your new
Thank
fantastic
you.
book. So excited to talk to you about this today. Um, I've been in sustainability for 14, 15 years, and I know you and I bonded on, life is about just taking action and not worrying about being perfect, especially in this world of sustainability and living consciously, where there's all this jargon and all these words. And, you know, it's just about doing your best and taking the plunge and making that action happen. So, before we talk about your book, I'm so fascinated to learn more about your story and to share that with everybody who's joined us today. Because what I find incredible about you, Daisy, is that at a very young age, may I share that age?
Yeah,
When you
sure.
decided were you 21? When you
Yeah.
decided to launch Ocean Gen.
Yeah.
So everybody, Daisy, at the age of 21, took the leap to create a non-profit charity called Ocean Gen. To Daisy, tell us all about it. Like, what was the step that made you decide to create a charity that was all about plastics in the ocean and how we can protect that? And at the age of 21.
Well, it was all really, it kind of all happened organically. I never really set out to start a nonprofit. It just kind of was a life journey that progressed. And kind of my starting point, both for learning about climate change and getting into sustainability, was I was doing a work experience at the United Nations in New York. And as the university that I went to encouraged you to go and work for 6 to 8 months. And so I did that, and I did mine at the UN. And it was a really interesting year. It was in 2015 when they were introducing the Sustainable Development Agenda. So 17 goals for the next 15 years of our world. And I was working for a small island. And a lot of the meetings I was being sent to on their behalf were about oceans and climate change. And I would sit in these meetings and be listening to kind of what was going on in the world. And this was kind of pre the whole Facebook boom and online boom of, plastics. And now, climate change is a hot topic that people are talking about. But back then, no one was really talking about it. And so I started to talk to friends and people within my social circle, like, did you know this was happening? This really is like the greatest threat to future generations. And, people in my social circles were saying, oh, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. And nor did I. And so kind of the idea for Ocean Generation came from that place of trying to educate my circle about different climate issues. And then it just grew to now become what it is, a foundation which educates people on climate change using kind of innovative methods like mobile gaming, YouTube, influencers. And then we also have programs on the ground, which I'm particularly passionate about, and the people aspect of climate change and how communities are affected. So we have programs teaching young people how to code, film documentary workshops. And most people say, but you're climate, so why would you be teaching young people these skills? Well, a lot of these communities that we work with, these are young people that previously would depend on tourism or fishing or natural resources for their sources of income and their future. But because of climate issues, natural disasters becoming more prevalent, we need to future-proof younger generations with alternative skills. And so that's what we do with our programs on the ground.
So you've been finding ways for people who live in island communities where, because of climate change, they can't do the things that they were doing. They can't fish anymore, or it's getting harder and harder to do that. So through Ocean Generation, you were teaching young people new skills,
Yeah,
who
exactly.
live in islands, to lead a future-based life that's not reliant on having to rely on the climate, which is
Exactly. Yeah.
incredible. Incredible. But what gave you the strength to, like, actually say, I'm going to take action, I'm going to do this, I'm going to create a foundation?
I think, well, first of all, the idea came from this idea to create a song called We Are the Oceans, which ended up kind of, it was like a campaign that happened where a bunch of YouTube influencers got involved and they did their version of this ocean song. And then it just kind of, I met more people who said, oh, that was really interesting. What else can you do to educate us? And just organically that way, I started meeting more people, connecting with more people who were encouraging me to do more and spread the word about this topic. And so I started to do that. And then eventually it became a situation where I needed an entity to drive all the traffic that we were getting from these different campaign activations. And that's how the organization started.
Fantastic. So guys who's joining us today, I'm Sarah Simmons. I'm here with Daisy Kendrick, who is just launched this incredible book called The Climate is Changing, Why Aren't We? And Daisy is sharing her story of how she got to this point to launch her book through taking the decision at the age of 21 years old to create a foundation about ocean protection and ocean generate. It's called Ocean Generation. So Daisy, you started this foundation, and what I love is that you made this decision to jump and to go for it and to create something without knowing what was going to happen. You just did it. And then I'm really inspired to hear that you say, you know, people then encouraged you to take the next steps. And I think that is incredible. That's what happens when you make the decision to take impact and make impact. Like, you just have to start, and then the world opens up, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people, normally ask that question, well, how did you do it? What was your plan? Well, to be completely honest, I didn't really have a plan. It just kind of kept going, and I just kept taking every opportunity, and through meeting new people and, starting conversations with them, just, through the action of doing is how kind of all this happened. And the same with the book. A lady read an interview in Marie Claire magazine. She reached out on LinkedIn. I emailed her back. The conversation started, and that's how we started talking about creating this book. So, I'm super, encourage everyone to just go with what you can and open your network and just, start conversations with other people, because you never know where that will lead you.
Totally. It's all about starting a conversation. We all have so much to give the world inside us, and all we need to do is take it out and get over our fear and just start without being perfect. So, on to your book. So this has been a really fantastic read. The climate is changing. Why aren't we? So what was your, and it just launched yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah. It was slightly delayed because of COVID and, production, etc. But finally yesterday it's out in UK bookstores, and then you can also get it on Amazon and Book Depository and other online platforms.
Incredible, because, like, it really debunks the whole of sustainability for everybody, because, I think there's so much, like, people almost shy away from sustainability because there's so much lingo and language that people don't understand. Even me, I've been in sustainability for 14 years, and it's never been about, for me, the lingo or the language. It's been about just doing your best and making innovation, making things happen, and making change without having to worry about the words. And I think today will be really nice to actually share with people different lessons from the book and different tips from the book about how we can debunk climate change and actually get down to the roots of this and talk about people and talk about the environment, but how we can do our part, because we are one world and one people, and how we can just join together and help each other. So
Yeah, no,
Share your
just to go off
story.
that, I mean, kind of the way that the book, what I wanted this book to be is an open conversation. And, you know, this came, and we've talked about this previously when we've talked before, is that this came from really a place of not fitting in. I think within the sustainable and the climate change movement, there's lots of stereotypes and there's lots of kind of these kind of these molds where people think, oh, well, if you care about this topic, you have to be this certain way. You have to be 100% vegan. You can't wear leather. You can't do this. You can't do the other. And I kind of, with this book, wanted to break down those stigmas and make this kind of, and open up the conversation to, and make this subject accessible, because the topic of climate change is completely overwhelming. It's huge. There is so much that comes under the umbrella. But how can we break this down into more of an individual level and see where we as individuals can have the power to make even just small changes? And, you know, most people might say, oh, well, it's not going to make a difference. But, you know, that saying of, you know, if you multiply small changes by millions of people, it will ultimately make an impact. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do with this. When you'll see throughout the book, there's lots of kind of practical tips and guides, and, you know, it's, and again, I don't expect everyone to do everything from this book. I don't even do that, and I'm very honest about that in the book, that I don't do everything here. But this is kind of a blueprint for people to take parts that they can do within their economic means, cultural means, societal means, and take those small bits and do their part. But ultimately, just in general, become more conscious about the way we consume, the way we think, and start caring. Because I firmly believe if we care about something because we know about something, we're more likely to make changes. And to hopefully, in some small way, this book will inspire people to care.
Absolutely. I love what you say right in the introduction. The first quote, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Yeah, every step we can take. Just, I think what's really nice is to share with people one day, for 1 month, make a decision to do one thing. And you can share your tips today. Like, I made a decision earlier this year. I wasn't going to buy small plastic bottles anymore. So you can see my water bottle in the background. That was a decision. And the great thing is, it's also like great for the environment and great for your finances. If you buy a bottle of water every day, it's like £600 a year, something crazy like that. Imagine what you can spend with that. So I love the idea as well of connecting sustainability to money and finance and impact.
Yeah, I think, like, also, you know, most people kind of have this preconception of, oh, well, I can't live sustainably because it's more expensive. Well, yes, that's true in certain products and certain areas, but there are things, as you talk about, like by not buying plastic bottles of water every day, or you know, buying plastic bags in the supermarket. There's many ways. And also, like, if you reduce your meat consumption, you'll find that your supermarket bill is much cheaper. And so there's lots of different ways to actually save money by being more sustainable. And a lot of people have the opposite kind of thing, saying, oh no, it's more expensive to be more sustainable. It's not. So it's, you know, again, thinking consciously and logically of, you know, these small changes that we can make.
Totally. I mean, you know what's incredible about sustainability, and you say something great in the book, like, this whole thing just really started, unsustainability really started in 1950, when you talk about plastics were invented in 1950. And if I think about my grandma, she used to never throw anything away. She used to fold her aluminium foil after she'd used it, put it back in the drawer and reuse it. She had all her plastic bags tucked away and would reuse them so many times. And we've done like all this damage to the world since 1950 something. But what I think would be really great now is to talk to share with people what I've learned through your incredible book, like starting in a sort of chronological order. So the first thing that you talk about that I found, like, you know, I'd heard about it, but I didn't really understand it fully, is the Paris Agreement from 2015. What happened there? What was that? If you want to share that with the world, I think it's a great starting point to educate.
So I would say that, so for years and years and years, and we kind of talk about that through the history of climate negotiations, the Paris Agreement was really kind of the first of its kind, where all countries came together to agree that we needed to make a change and we needed to reduce our carbon emissions, and that every country needed to play their part, both large and small. And so the Paris Agreement was really this kind of monumental moment, I would say, which kind of went hand in hand with the Sustainable Development Agenda that I talked about before, which was, these new goals to live more, well, sustainably, but within everything. Because at the end of the day, everything is interconnected, from education to gender equality. Everything interrelates with having a healthy planet and for everything else to succeed. If we don't have a planet, people can't prosper, people won't be equal. So using those goals as a framework, it hand in hand with this climate agreement that all countries had come to agree on, was really kind of that monumental, pivotal point. And I would also say during this time when they were in Paris signing this agreement, there was so much more than just kind of like UN countries involved. I would say that it was a huge bridge for NGOs, individuals, influencers, philanthropists to all come together as well to get behind this agreement, to also spread the word. So climate change became more of a topic, more of a conversation for people to really understand. And so that was kind of a pivotal moment. However, we've now reached a point, not to pinpoint certain countries and places, but for example, unfortunately, the United States, for example, has decided to now recently pull out of the Paris Agreement, which is a really tragic moment, because there was years and years and years that we went behind this negotiation, because before there was negotiations held in Copenhagen, Kyoto, all of Brazil, and that Paris one was the first time everyone kind of came to agree. And so we had that moment, but now we're kind of going back with some world leaders changing their mind of what they're going to do towards their climate commitments. But the Paris Agreement was the first time really everyone agreed, all 193 countries, that we needed to do something about climate change.
So I think what you talk about this, and we'll come to it again later. What's really powerful when we as individuals can't control what countries do. If America changes its mind, that's a huge blow to the world. But what I find, I've been passionate about, and I champion, is conscious consumerism, which is where we all as individuals have the choice. And as individuals, this is where we can really shine our power to the world, and we can actually reverse engineer change by all en masse making big sort of individual decisions, and if all of us do those decisions, we have to reverse engineer. We will affect the companies who, so if we all decide we don't want to buy in an unsustainable way, we don't want to buy throwaway fashion anymore, we will reverse engineer so that all the companies like H&M, like Zara, etc., will have to make changes in order to keep their sales thriving. And this idea, I think, is incredibly powerful for us all to take away from today. And we can share more about that when we come onto the fashion section, and you talk a lot about conscious consumerism. I think it's an incredibly amazing thing, because we can actually use consumerism, what we buy. Like, at the end of the day, buying is great. It is what our whole capitalist culture has been built on. And I think it's a fantastic, what we buy can be a fantastic route for change. We just have to change our habits, and then we in turn have the power to change all the companies in every sector, in fashion, in beauty, in health, in food.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. I mean, kind of one of the things with the Paris Agreement, the kind of top goal was to kind of limit the global temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius and not go above that. Now that's, as you say, a huge overarching goal that countries are setting those. However, how do we get to that point? Corporations will play a huge part, but then, as you say, how we as consumers and what we demand from the companies that we buy for is a huge way that we can have an impact. And again, like, something that I always feel like as well gets kind of miscommunicated sometimes in the climate conversation is that, oh, capitalistic societies are bad, etc. At the end of the day, that's the way the world works. That's the way the world goes round. So, we live in a society where we consume and that's not going to change anytime. That's not going to change tomorrow. So how do we, as you say, make more conscious consumer decisions and kind of alter our habits? And when we start not pressuring, but when we start changing our demands, the corporations will have to keep up with what we want. And so one of the things that I found when writing the book was that, you know, people in young Generation Z, millennials, are saying, you know, we want to buy sustainably, we want to buy more consciously. However, the data is not actually supporting the way we're actually spending our money versus what we say we want. And I think there is still a huge gap and room for lots of businesses to take charge in this space of providing alternatives. Because right now, sustainable options, and again, that definition is incredibly broad of what sustainable and conscious means. So that's another whole other conversation. But, you know, there's not enough sustainable options readily available for consumers to buy how they would like. So I think there's a huge room for business with purpose, even large corporations to start investing in research and development, you know, to come up with alternatives and make more sustainable, conscious products more accessible to the masses. And I think that will be pivotal in the movement as well.
I agree. I've actually just launched an impact coaching program, which is for individuals, brands, corporations, everybody on the scale of how you can build an impact business and transform an impact business. So I've been a brand strategist and a top international fashion buyer for 20 years. And my whole sort of success came because, number one, whatever we make in the world has to be desirable. It has to be gorgeous. It has to be wow. It has to be must have in whichever shape or form you create something. And today it has to innovate. Like, we have enough. I say we don't need more. We need meaning right now. Mm-hmm. Of course we want to buy things, but they have to be really, really innovative. And this is where I think is the huge opportunity in conscious consumerism and business with purpose, because consuming is great. It really is. Like, it is the world, and it should be the world. And imagine if everything we bought in the world, and I honestly believe this is where I would like the world to be headed to, and I think we are headed that way. Imagine if we could transform everything we bought to be sustainable. Imagine the positive impact in the world that can have.
Yeah, and I think there's really kind of, and I know that you're kind of one of the pioneers as well with that, with what you're telling me about the Jean brand that you started. I think it's really exciting to see in the kind of business space, especially with many startups, a lot. Nowadays, it's kind of uncool to start a business without having a purpose or some kind of giving back aspect of your business. And I find that really, really encouraging within the startup space, that founders are seeing that benefit of, you know, we should give back with what we're creating. And I think that, you know, the biggest business opportunities lie in the areas where there's like global challenges to solve. And I think that's also really interesting as well, something with the nonprofit space as well, is that, you know, especially now after COVID and everything that's going on in the world, you know, how sustainable are nonprofits and where can business with purpose really come in, you know, to be sustainable, but also solve problems and earn money at the same time. So I think that's a really interesting space. So I'd love to also just kind of, for you to say more about what you're doing with your kind of business purpose, coaching, etc.
Sure. So my impact coaching program, everything, as you said, I developed a sustainable denim brand 14 years ago. So my background is I was a buyer for Harvey Nichols for 7 years, straight out of university. My dad was a textile entrepreneur. My mum was a fashion stylist. And actually, my dad had a textile company in Yorkshire, and he was a pioneer of sustainable fabrics and what we're calling today creating things that have a circularness to them, the circular economy, as Ellen MacArthur has well documented. So my dad would make fabrics where all the waste went back and everything was reused. And I saw the power of fashion and textiles and the good it can have. And after 7 years at working for Harvey Nichols, I would launch great new ideas and initiatives into the store, of organics, of sustainable, of amazing, like new experience-based brands that were good for the world. But these were 10% of what, as a buyer, I could buy. 90% was what, you know, the store was filled with, which is the big luxury brands that everybody knows. And I became very frustrated seeing the increase of fast luxury, as well as, you know, fast fashion at the high street end. Fast luxury operates in the same way. They're actually garments made in the same factories. I have been to Bangladesh and I have seen Ralph Lauren being made in the same factory as Primark. And that for me is not luxury. Luxury is about craftsmanship, and I wanted to do my part to change it. And also fashion is about being able to, and what we make is about being able to impact people, as you rightly say, and the environment. Like you and I bonded on that. Sustainability isn't the environment or people, it's people and the environment. So I was increasingly unhappy and dissatisfied because I was seeing all this waste in fashion and I wasn't making personal impact. And this is the thing, we all have this idea inside us, and this is what my impact coaching program is all about. Everybody who's watching now, you all have ideas inside you and you can make those happen. You just need to have a process and a framework. So I had my buying process, which I talk about in my impact coaching program. And you know, for product development and for creating great, fantastic, award-winning brands. And I just put it to use. I didn't know how I was going to succeed as an impact entrepreneur. I just jumped and did it. And I built a sustainable denim brand from scratch because I really looked at every element of, okay, I took a jean and I reverse engineered it. And this is what I find really exciting about today, is the possibility for true innovation in everything. This is what I'm really passionate about. And I know you are too, when you talk about textiles in your book. But the opportunity for textile innovation is huge. So just because things have been done in a certain way doesn't mean they need to continue being done in a certain way. So I took a jean, I broke down that jean to the basics. Jeans right now, they're made in mass looms, they're made unsustainably from the cotton to the finish. And I said, okay, what's a jean? In the initial part, it's cotton. Okay, so what happens with cotton? So if cotton, unless cotton is fair trade, it can be totally unsustainable, fair trade and organic. But people either buy fair trade or organic, not both. Fair trade is about people and organic is about the environment. And I was like, well, you can't really split those two things out. But many people buy the cotton for marketing purposes. What I did was say, no, sorry, this is about a product. The product is for the people at the end of the chain who are buying it. And it's for the people at the beginning of the chain who are making it, for everybody to benefit from it. So I took organic fair trade cotton. I find natural indigo dyers rather than chemical dyers in India to make the fabric, the yarn into indigo. It was sun dried naturally with no CO2. It was then flown and carbon offset to Italy, where it was produced in a sustainable way. And then the collection was sold into the best stores around the world. I innovated that from scratch with an amazing technical team. But the reason I say that is because if I can do it, anyone can do it. Obviously, I have the technical background and I know how to build brands. So that's why I built my impact coaching program, so that individuals can benefit from when they want to make something, know that they have a process to follow that enables their success. Because what I see time and time again, and it's the key reason I created the program, is people kind of making something, but not really making a brand or having an initiative, but sort of saying, I kind of want to change the world, so I'm kind of going to make something. But they don't have the tools, the experience, the expertise to really like learn and supercharge their success. And they struggle because it's hard unless you have the processes, the tools and techniques. They struggle, and they also don't think big. They say, I might sell a few pieces of jewelry. No, like, so what? Think big. Because when you think big, you can actually impact the world. And that's, for me, what this is all about. I wanted to build a process with my impact coaching program, taking my 20 years of expertise that anybody can use. And then rather than selling a few pieces of jewelry, they can sell hundreds and thousands of pieces of jewelry or clothes or whatever, because they have a system and a process to follow. And that means that, you know, there's two sides to this conscious consumerism. There's the buyer, but there's also the creator. And that means when the creators have a process, rather than having like sort of limited success, you can supercharge your success. So that for me is what it was all about.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you're saying in terms of like scalability. That's something I think within the sustainable space people are struggling with, is how to make these processes scalable. And one of the things that I've noticed a lot is that it's normally smaller brands that are actually leading the way, or individual entrepreneurs that are leading the way to do things right. And the bigger brands, which have the resources and the funding to be able to support these processes, are not necessarily doing so. And it's down to kind of smaller brands to lead the way, which in some ways isn't fair, because they're having to slow down their production. They're having to have higher costs at the beginning, when bigger brands have the ability to lead that way. But yeah, I think scalability is a really important word within the sustainable space, because there's so many incredible processes that are currently happening, but how do we make them, you know, more readily available? You know, but then that kind of goes in contrast with what we're saying of, you know, we should care about our things more, so we don't need to consume as more. So
yeah, but we also all need to buy new things, because we are ourselves, we're a hero product. That's what I talk about a lot. Like, and buying is part of our culture. Buying is not bad, just buying smart. And in terms of scalability, you talk about it in your book, like the power of social media. So I find, and I talk about this in my impact coaching, the incredible opportunity right now is when you do it smart and you learn to do it right, you can create a brand yourself as an individual that has the power to scale globally via the means of digital and social media and real influence. So you talk about real influence and the power of social media in your book. Share more with everybody.
I mean, you know, social media, Instagram in particular, you know, they're incredible digital tools that we have, you know, at our fingertips. So as you say, for anyone to grow a brand anytime, starting tomorrow. And, you know, one of the things that I really encourage is, you know, for people to use their voice. There's an American political scientist who says that you only need 3.5% of the population to mobilize to have huge impact. So if that was applied to the climate movement, I think we could make, you know, a bigger difference if more people use their voice and share their platforms. And there's kind of two sides to that. There's one where, you know, we're seeing great businesses and sustainable businesses use social platforms to, you know, grow their brands. We're seeing influencers, that there is a couple that I was able to interview for the book, who shared their stories on why they're using their platforms for good, which is really inspiring, and how movements have started. I also interviewed Extinction Rebellion for the book. They've been, you know, a huge success in terms of mobilizing people into creating a global movement. So, you know, the possibilities using social media are incredible. But then there's also the other side, which I, you know, really encourage people to be aware of, in terms of, you know, there are people, and very influential people, who are climate deniers, who spread, you know, fake news, etc., which can have a negative impact on the movement. But also in terms of brands, and going back to what we were talking about in fashion, you know, brands, there's, you know, the term greenwashing, where brands claim they're doing one thing, but actually if you start to look into it, it's not so much. And there's some of the bigger brands that have claimed to do conscious collections, using recycled plastics, or, you know, vegan leathers. But also, while that sounds great and it looks great online, if you start looking into it really, you know, even though you're using recycled plastics, the problem is when you put those into the washing machine, those microplastics are then going into our waterways. So you're actually prolonging the problem and not solving the problem. So, you know, we do need more innovation and more research to alternative fabrics and textiles, going back to the fashion. But in terms of social media, I think it's really important for people to do their own due diligence on, you know, what's good and what's not, and what to share and what sources to share and what not to share as well.
I have, yeah, two things. When you talk about, like, I was super interested in what you said about 3% to mobilize. What do you mean by that in more detail? It takes 3% of a movement of people to mobilize change?
Yeah, that's what the studies are saying, according to this American scientist. Yeah, they're saying that if you can mobilize 3.5% of the population, you will have impactful change. And they've proven that with different movements like the BLM and others. So and to be honest, if you think about the size of the world, 3.5% is a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of people that we need to care, that need to start opening up the conversation, sharing the knowledge to get more people involved, and then hopefully we'll start having more impactful change.
3% of the population. That is so inspiring to make real change. And it goes back, Daisy, to what we were talking about, that, you know, companies, we as consumers can lead and be all powerful back to the companies. Companies have to change if consumers stop buying in the way that they were. And honestly, that's actually happening now. I think that COVID has been an incredible, in the sense of change and speeding up change in the world. COVID has really done us a great favor in really speeding up both the digital change and the way we consume change, and people being aware in new ways. And I really, really agree with you that this all creates new opportunities, and massive new opportunities in business to succeed. People want new innovation. I also agree with you. I feel quite strongly about the issue of vegan leather. It's plastic, you know,
Yeah.
and I was looking at this. Okay, vegan leather can be slightly better for the environment in how it's made, but what about how it's, like you said, the microplastics that go back into the world? I think it would be great to share with people what microplastics are, Daisy. And you know, when you're shopping, like, vegan leather is polyurethane badness, and
Yeah.
like leather is made from a cow that's still, I don't know, that's happening anyway. It's not creating more plastic. I feel very strongly about this in textiles, that you can't just call something good for the world when you know, you really need to look at it in more detail. Vegan leather and faux fur, they have huge chemicals and huge imprints. I think the answer is, no, I know the answer is in real innovation, real innovation, not faking it, which, you know, vegan leather isn't good.
Exactly, especially when it, you know, not all of it, but a lot of it, as you say, is made of really intense chemicals. It's made from plastics, which is creating more of a problem. However, if you look at, for example, there's some brands that are using the byproduct skin of the meat industry. So right now, those animals would already be killed for the meat industry.
Exactly.
So what they do is they take those skins that would just be discarded, and they're using them. Those animals would have died anyways because people are consuming meat, and they're transforming those into goods.
Exactly.
Now that's a clever way of kind of this whole circular system. And even talking about food, the same applies. And one of the things, like within the food chapter within the book, you know, is talking about people assume and automatically switch off, saying, oh, well, you know, if you care about the environment, you have to be vegan. And so one of the things that I was really honest about in the book too is that, you know, it's not realistic that everyone is a vegan tomorrow. It's not just going to happen. The other element, you know, we have a tendency in the West and living in, you know, big cities is to say, oh, well, you know, it's easy to be vegan because blah, blah, blah. But there's some communities that, because of where they live, their economic means, their remoteness of their locations, they can't be vegan. So that's not the solution for the entire planet to go vegan. It is true that we need to reduce our meat consumption purely because the amount of water and other resource and land that we're taking up, we're cutting down forests to make more room for animals. So we do need to reduce our meat consumption, yes, but going 100% vegan is not necessarily the solution, because there's another thing that we talk about in the book, which is like regenerative farming. And, you know, and that's looking at how we give back to the soil, we give back to the earth through animals grazing, their manure, you know, how we can grow crops from that. There's some terrains, like even in the UK, in the Pennines, you can't grow crops on these on this terrain. So the livelihood for people is to have animals on there. And so we need to kind of move away from those stigmas of saying, oh, this is bad and this is wrong and this is right and that's the only way. It's not. We have to look at the whole, I think, holistic approach in this system of how we give back to the planet while consuming consciously and being more aware of, you know, eating a more, you know, locally produced diet is better for the planet than, you know, going to the supermarket and buying green beans from Kenya and oranges from Spain. And, you know, we should be eating more seasonally and what our local farmers are providing. That's an alternative to this whole, you have to be vegan. No, if you eat more local, you're making a huge impact on the planet just by starting that way. So there's lots of these different ways that we need to kind of change our mindsets on, you know, how we give back to our planet and how we change our habits, but without being radical, you know.
And how we give back to ourselves as well. Like if we look at ourselves consciously and say, how do I want to eat? What do I want to fill my body with? Do I want to go to a local farmer's market where I know I can talk to the person, the farmer, and say, how is this created and grown? And with what I wear, do I want to invest in something that I'm actually, what does this say about me? You know, when you buy something, I think this is a really great tip to share, is like what you wear is a reflection of you. So if you're buying like fast fashion from that you're going to wear 5 times, what does it say about you that's not made in great quality? Or if you're buying something that's really specially made, it can say a lot of great things about you.
Definitely. And I think, you know, once we start appreciating what's behind, or the people behind our supply chains that made our clothes, or, you know, you buy a piece of vintage, it has a story, you feel more empowered. I do. I feel more empowered when I'm wearing a garment, you know, that I know where it came from. I know it had a life before. Or instead of this disposable culture. In the UK, there's a statistic that says women, after wearing something for just 3 times, consider that item of clothing old after 3 times, which is crazy. And so there's an organization called EcoAge, and they encourage this 30 wear challenge, which I always ask myself now, am I going to wear this piece of clothing more than 30 times? If yes, even if it may not be a sustainable or a organic brand, if you're going to wear it more than 30 times, then it's worth buying, even if it's fast fashion. But ask yourself that question, am I going to wear this more than 30 times? Because if you buy something to wear it once, that was, you know, £5 from Primark, I mean, we can't continue to live in this disposable society that we've created because of trends and online fashion and things like that. So, you know, just taking one step back as an individual and asking yourself, you know, will I wear this multiple times? And also, where did this come from? Who made this? And I think when you, again, it goes back to that point that I said at the beginning, when we start caring about these things and about climate or people, I think we value our things more when we care, and when we know where these things came from, it has more meaning, and then we'll have, you know, cherish it longer.
I think this is a great tip, Daisy, to think about, you know, 30 times when you wear something or when you're going to buy something, how much you're going to value it and use it. And I think this is a great tip, both for the consumers watching us right now, and also for the brands watching us right now. As a consumer, what I found incredibly helpful is really, like, if you wear something 3 times and only 3 times, it's because you weren't really conscious when you bought the thing in the first place. You didn't really sit there and look at yourself in front of the mirror and go, where am I going to wear this? Is this really my style? And has it got longevity and timelessness to it? When you actually do those things, then you would start to invest in pieces, you know, whether they're from the high street or they're from a like vintage, or they're from luxury, doesn't matter. Actually, it is about how much you wear it. If you're going to buy something from Zara and you're going to wear it 30 times, that's great. Zara, that's how things should be made. But it really comes back to understanding yourself and being more conscious. Then to the people who are brands here, is what you're actually making. Because again, you want to focus on making something that's great quality, that's going to last in the washing machine, or that's going to last as a product, that's also going to have a timelessness to it, and be something that people love forever. Like actually creating more and more things is great, but that they should last and be truly innovative. So it would be great to, you've been sharing so many tips, but before we go today, it would be great to have some more, like Daisy's top 10 tips for living consciously. So plastics, we can go through like one of your chapters step by step, and you can give a quick fire tip process. So plastics, your second chapter is on plastics. And as I said earlier, for those who have just joined us, Daisy, this is Daisy Kendrick, who I'm with now, who's the author of The Climate is Changing, Why Aren't We? And Daisy gives tips on how to live consciously without having to be perfect, and goes through the whole of the sustainable background and industry, and debunks like these words that like stop us actually from doing things because it's so overwhelming, and actually goes and simplifies everything, which is fantastic, Daisy. So chapter 2, Daisy talks about plastics. It's only been 54 years since plastics were created, since the plastic bag was created. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we've only really started using plastics in the last 60 years, and look at the devastation that they have created for our oceans, for our planet, because almost absolutely everything we use contains plastic. And, that's just become the way of life.
1 truckload a minute of plastic is dumped into the ocean.
Yeah, on average.
Every minute.
Yeah. And then that breaks down into microplastics, which then goes into our food systems. If you eat fish, you're probably most likely to be eating microplastics.
Please can you explain to everybody here what's microplastics?
Okay, so microplastics are very, 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 very tiny pieces of plastic that are almost invisible to the eye, to the naked eye. You wouldn't be able to see them. But after, years and years and years of decomposing, a normal plastic item will turn into these tiny, tiny, tiny microplastics, which are all in our waterways. Our oceans are full of microplastics, and this is having severe consequences and effects on, like for example, if we talk about the ocean with ocean life, and fish or wildlife, they're consuming these microplastics, and then not only, and seabirds as well. Many seabirds are mistaking plastics for food, and so we're having this terrible issue where it's something crazy, like 99% of birds have plastics within their stomachs because they're, mistaking it for food. But again, it goes back to that kind of, well, how do we stop this? Because this is such a huge topic. And if everything is made from plastic, where can we make a difference? And while this sounds super repetitive, and I'm sure everyone here that's like watching the live has heard these things before, but just try and reduce your plastic consumption, from the amount of, bottles that you buy, to the way that you, use your reusable bags in the supermarket, use your reusable coffee cups. I mean, I've been in this movement a while now, and even saying those things I find annoying because everyone's saying them, but not enough people are actually changing their habits and, using their reusable bottles, their bags. But that's just one small way that we as individuals can make a difference.
Yeah, guys, as we're talking, like share, feel free to share a question. If you have a question, or also share with Daisy and I like one great decision you're going to take right now, today, to make your own small difference, because it's not repetitive, Daisy. Like it's if we, as I said, if we each commit today to make one new decision each month, to be on the first day of the month, to a new decision to be more sustainable or live consciously. So like I said, I made this decision to stop buying small plastic bottles when I would run to go run somewhere for convenience, and use this instead. And it's so great because I feel great, because I know that I had used this for years, and not all those wasted bottles. Like if I buy a bottle every time I go out every day, like when in a working week, how many bottles is that a year? About 600. And how much is one bottle of water? About 80p. So how much are you also saving? 600 pounds. What do you want to do with that money? So that's like one, like where I think it's the exciting part of also sustainability, when we look at ourselves as individuals and say, how does this empower us? So, and like you said about the tips on you know, on the coffee cups and on like bags in the supermarket, it is simple, say it a million times, but actually a million times we need to hear these things, so that when we're in the supermarket and we get out the car and we run in and we go, oh, I left the bags in the boot of the car, oh, forget it, I'll just get new, you know, more bags. Actually, it might make you think and go, no, 54 tons of plastic go in the ocean every minute. And you know, this microplastics is a big thing as well to think about, because it goes inside your body, inside the animal's body, inside the animal of the animal that you might eat if you eat meat. It's forever endless, and we can each do our part.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
So what would be your next tip?
I think, well, we've talked about previously in this conversation a lot about fashion, and I mentioned it earlier, you know, just caring about where your things come from, and do that kind of 30 wear check. You know, will I wear this more than 30 times? If so, it's okay to buy it. And the other thing is that look for cool brands and different pieces from vintage stores or brands that are being transparent with their supply chains, telling you who are making their clothes. We talked about it when we first had a conversation. This brand Zazie Vintage, I love their brand, because the founder of that, she's completely transparent with her supply chains. Who are the women in India, who are the women in Uzbekistan, Afghanistan in the supply chain making the clothes? And when you know that, you feel more connected to the things that you're wearing. So kind of look, and again, we talk about social media. Use social media to find these incredible new brands that exist out there, those small businesses that need your support, that are offering alternatives, but also trendy and cool alternatives. Like we talked about, there's this stigma within the environmental space, or this kind of frumpy hippie stigma. You know, we have to get rid of that. There's such amazing products out there that
join Sarah Simmons London as well, because increasingly more and more I will be talking about great conscious brands that you can discover, as I know that so send your email or DM me if you want to join our power network or come to my impact coaching program and classes, because from a conscious brand point of view, Daisy, I know it's super difficult to find great brands that are sexy and gorgeous that you want to buy. If you just Google sustainable fashion, awful things come up, if I'm honest with you. And my whole background is curating top conscious brands, because you absolutely shouldn't have to suffer how you look like in order to do good. But Zazie Vintage is a great brand. And also at high street level, I really love what Zara are doing with their Join Life collection, because they're not talking about it, they're not shouting about it, they're just getting on and doing it and making more and more of what they do sustainable and fully traceable under their Join Life collection. If you look, more and more of that is of their collection is actually under Join Life. And that's, again, it's not perfect. It's like, but it says every garment, like what's the traceability factor, what percentage of the fat of the yarn or the substance it's made from is recycled or organic. And it's just, again, like all massive steps in the right direction. So like that's one high street company I will buy from, but there's another one I won't name, but I won't buy from. So again, making that conscious decision is a great thing. Someone has a question here. Why is the media not talking about the COVID-19 impact on the environment? Do you have anything to say about that, Daisy?
I do. I mean, there's two sides. There's one really negative, obviously, that we're seeing that, you know, we're all using disposable masks, gloves, you know, a lot more PPE that health workers and everyone has to use. So that means that we're creating much more waste. And already on beaches and in the ocean, people who are doing cleanups and things are seeing masks in the ocean. And so it would be, you know, like one of the things is like, people please dispose of your individual COVID protection responsibly, recycle where possible, or even when it comes to masks, like use reusable masks if possible. They obviously need washing more frequently, but it means that you as an individual are reducing your waste. But there's also a positive side from COVID, which I was having a conversation with this marine scientist, and it was an incredibly inspiring conversation. And I came away feeling like, wow, this is incredible. Is that, the time that we went into lockdown, the planet essentially had a break from, cars, planes, just cities had, time to breathe. There was lots of things in social media from like Venice where the canals had cleaned up, and that's just in a couple of months of giving our planet a break. But one of the interesting conversations I had with this lady was about the impact of sound on marine species. And for example, in Hong Kong, in the ship, there's lots of dolphins in the ports of Hong Kong. Not many people know that, but there's lots of dolphins there. And what they found doing like sound studies is that during like normal days, pre-COVID, ships are going across. Whenever there was a tiny break in the shipping lanes, the dolphins would speak to each other constantly. But then as soon as the ships would go back over, they'd stop speaking, because obviously the frequencies were interfering with how they could communicate. And what they found is that during this break, there's been lots less ships, lots less airplanes, is that marine life underwater has been communicating, and the sounds have been absolutely incredible, and something that scientists have not heard for decades because of the way that, we're constantly affecting their environment through our actions. So I thought that was really interesting, and that was a positive side of the COVID impact, where, just giving our planet a few weeks, months in some cities to breathe has really allowed nature and wildlife to come back to its own. So that was a really important lesson, I think, from what she was telling me in those stories. But obviously the waste is the sad part. We need to be more responsible with that.
Yeah.
But I think it gave the world a break.
But on balance, exactly. And I think it's about looking at everything on balance. The positive, the negative, and really weighing up both. And obviously, like always, for me, I'm always staying on the positive and always saying, how can we just do more, do better? And I think what you just shared is so encouraging, in the sense, because I was quite scared when you said that about the climate rising by 2%, and actually it's risen by 3% already. Has it?
Are you talking about temperature?
The temperature, yeah, which you can share with people, like the danger of the planet rising by more than 2%, and it's already risen more than 2%.
Yeah, well, that's also going back to the Paris Agreement. So they want to cap the temperature rise by 2 Celsius, but the way that we're heading is that we're going to be 3 Celsius or more.
Yeah. And
for small islands, that's having devastating consequences. And that's also something that I talk about in the book, is the people aspect of climate change and communities. And I interviewed this incredible girl from the Marshall Islands who, talks about by 2050, because of sea levels rising, with higher temperatures, ice caps are melting, sea levels are rising. Places like the Marshall Islands and lots of other small islands may not even exist by 2050 because they will be completely inundated. Today, people's homes are washing away because of sea level rise and different climate issues. And we don't tend to think about that in our daily lives. But young people like this girl from the Marshall Islands is sharing, when I interviewed her, her fears of, she may not have a home by the time she's, 60 years old. And then under international law, there's very little that protects climate refugees. So where do these people go? Who do they belong to? What passport will her children have if the entire Marshall Islands goes underwater?
Just to share, Daisy, we've got like 1 minute left on this live. And I think that I agree with you, everything that you're saying. It's like, but what I think is the positive is that that's really scary that the islands could disappear. But the positive that you just shared about what's come out of COVID is that how quickly things can also change back. And again, I think I'd love to end on our shared passion for conscious consumerism. You're all the consumer, and living consciously, like through making these mass changes ourselves in how we shop and how we buy and how we live. we can massively affect the companies to change their ways. And then these global organizations will have to change, which then can massively positively impact the environment and impact people living all the way back to the roots. Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And at the end of the day, everything is interconnected. And without a healthy planet, people will not be able to thrive. And so it's so important that through our choices and the way that we live, we do the best within our abilities to make a difference in whatever small way that we can.
To make a difference, go and get Daisy's amazing book, because it really does just debunk and simplify things so that you can understand these words like the Paris Agreement and UN sustainability goals and all these words, and actually just have, like, it's really quick and easy to read, and you've got like simple tips, and it's a great just go-to Bible, like, to talk about and live by. So thank you very much, Daisy, and thank you everybody for being with us today. It's been an amazing chat, and